You lack fluency in speaking and writing English at work. You are therefore not confident when participating in meetings, holding conversations, or performing any writing task. Well, the solution is easier than you think. You need to create perfectly structured sentences by learning how to combine clauses. Clauses are the building blocks of sentences. Basically, sentences are made of clauses. By the end of this tutorial, you will have a much better understanding on the different types of clauses that there are in English, dependent clauses, and how to combine them in order to create better sentences. And I am 100% sure that if you practice this, if you practice combining clauses and understanding how they work, your written and spoken English will improve, giving you the confidence that you need to write and speak more fluently. This tutorial is organized in 3 parts. First, we're going to have a look at the definition of a clause. Second, we're gonna look into the 4 different types of dependent clauses that you need to start mastering. And third, we are going to have the opportunity to do some practice and see plenty of examples. So if you're ready, let's crack on! Before anything, let me show you this sentence. When my boss, who had been working in the company for 6 months when I got the job, told me I should wait 1 more year to ask for a pay rise, I realized that he wasn't happy that I was in his team. At first, it may look like a bit complicated, but I'm sure that by the end of this tutorial, you are going to be able to identify the 4 different types of dependent clauses that are being used to make this sentence. I am referring to noun clauses, adjective or relative clauses, adverbial clauses, and that clauses. What is a clause? Well, a clause is the combination of a noun phrase functioning as a subject and a verb phrase functioning as a predicator, plus some optional extra phrases. Let me give you some examples. When my boss told me, that's one clause. Who had been working in the company for 6 years, that is another clause. I realized he wasn't happy with me. Those are also examples of clauses. What type are they? Wait and see. By the way, if you're not 100% certain of the definition of a phrase, you can check my video right there where I explain what a phrase is and the different types that you need to know in order to create clauses. In this image, you can see the different levels of any language organized according to their complexity. Starting with the smallest unit that has got meaning, we have words. There are 2 types of words. We got grammatical words and lexical words. And if you put those together, you get phrases. And then if you put phrases together, such as a noun phrase and a verb phrase, you get clauses. And finally, when you put clauses together, you get sentences. And that is how we build our messages. We go from the smallest unit, smallest block, to the biggest one, sentences. It is time already to look into the different types of clauses. Types of clauses. How many do you know? Well, there are mainly 2 different types. Independent clauses and obviously dependent clauses. What is an independent clause? It is the combination of a subject plus a predicate that expresses a complete idea. It has meaning on its own. When we combine 2 independent clauses with a coordinating conjunction, fanboys, we get a compound sentence, also known as coordinate sentence. Let's see some examples, but before, let me remind you of a video, that one over there, where I speak about the different types of sentences that there are in English. Compound, complex, simple sentences. I asked my boss for a pay rise, but he didn't give it to me. So I left the job and I found a much better one. 4 independent clauses connected with 3 coordinating conjunctions. But, so, and. It is time next to talk about the dependent clauses. A dependent clause, contrary to an independent one, is a clause that doesn't express a complete idea on its own. It is subordinated to an independent clause. So together, they create a complex sentence, also known as a subordinated sentence. And you know what? They are easily recognizable because they are set off by a dependent clause marker, aka also known as subordinating conjunction. How about that, yeah? Let's see some examples. Since I wasn't happy with my salary, I asked my boss for a pay rise. In this example, we have one dependent clause, since I wasn't happy with my salary, and one independent clause, I asked my boss for a pay rise. Together, they make a complex sentence. How many dependent clauses do you know? We are going to cover 4 different types: noun clauses, adjective clauses, adverbial clauses, and that clauses. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty because for that I'm going to create other videos where I intend to explain each one of those in more detail. Let's begin with noun clauses. What is a noun clause? Well, it is a clause that functions as a noun. It can be a subject, it can be an object, a direct object, but it could also be a subject complement. It can also be the object of a preposition or even the object of a verb. If this sounds a bit too complicated for you, it is understandable because this is advanced grammar. Yeah, it is advanced English. If you are interested and want to get your English to an advanced level, you can check my videos where I cover those topics. The typical conjunctions that you are going to see in noun clauses are that, whether, if, and WH words as well. Noun clause functioning as a subject. What you do in your free time is your business. As a subject complement, the example is: my boss isn't what you would call a good boss. That noun clause is acting as a subject complement. And finally, I'll give you an example of a noun clause acting or functioning as an object. She said that she wasn't gonna go to the meeting. That is a noun clause acting as an object. Next, it's time for adjective clauses, also known as relative clauses. I'm sure you are familiar with this type of clauses, so I'm not going to go into the detail. I'm just gonna say that an adjective clause is a clause that functions as an adjective. Therefore, they modify nouns. In the sentence that I showed you at the beginning, who had been working in the company for 6 months, is a clear example of a relative clause. In this case, that clause modifies the noun boss. It tells us something about that noun. It tells us how long that person had been working in the company when I arrived. It is time now to talk about adverbial clauses. What is an adverbial clause? What is the structure, and are there any different types? An adverbial clause is a clause that functions as an adverb. This means that this clause, this entire clause, modifies or says something about the independent clause, the verb in the independent clause. What is the structure? Like any other dependent clause, adverbial clauses are easily recognizable because they start with a conjunction, a subordinating conjunction. And after that, we have the subject, a verb, plus any other elements or components. Are there any different kinds of adverbial clauses? Of course there are. It all depends on the relationship that the subordinate clause establishes with the independent clause. For example, you can have adverbial clauses of contrast or concession, condition, result, time, etc. Let's see some examples. Adverbial clauses of time. For example, when I arrived, they had already started the meeting. I was a little bit upset because they had started the meeting without me. This one is an adverbial clause of reason. We have the subordinating conjunction because. I will complain to my boss if this happens again. This is also an adverbial clause, but in this case it's a condition adverbial clause with the subordinating conjunction if. And the next one is an example of contrast. Although I had complained to my boss about this, they continued doing the same thing. And finally, I want to talk about that clauses. These type of clauses obviously start with the conjunction that. And they are the only clauses that can function as a noun clause. They can also be adverbial clauses, and they can also be adjective clauses. You have the conjunction that, and then you have a subject plus a verb. These clauses can go after nouns, they can go after adjectives, and of course, they can also go after verbs. Let me give you one example of each. She said that I wasn't good at my job. In this case, that is following the verb said. Another example, she's not happy that I am doing a much better job than she is. She is not happy with the possibility that I am going to get promoted before her. There you go, those are that clauses. They are everywhere, so I encourage you to start looking for them. Finally, time for some practice. This is the last part of the video, and this is where you check your understanding.